Hey, Jojo. Welcome to Bombshell Radio. I am so excited to have you here. How on earth did we connect? I think it was one of those like random Instagram meetings or something where it's like, I vibe with you. Your story's awesome. We should talk more. And then we started chatting and I heard kind of your background, which is just unreal. I'm about to read your bio to the listeners in a second. And I'm so excited for them to hear from you because, you know, your story is quite unique. But I feel like, as you know, because it's what you write about in your book, it translates to so many other abusive situations that are so common. So let me just jump in with your bio here so people get an idea of who you are, and then we'll dive into our chat. But I am really pumped for this. So Jojo Dries is an author and a speaker. Her book, The Lotus, How I Beat the Patriarchy, can be found on Amazon and was released in June 2018. It's not only a motivational book, but a gripping, detailed account of what it was like living in a home with a culture of abuse, and how Jojo removed herself from those circumstances. Jojo's book gives readers the tools and a plan to remove themselves from the toxic situations they may be in. The book is raw, relatable, and true. The principles Jojo identifies will work for anyone in any toxic situation, whether it is personal or professional. Jojo has owned and runs several companies and is a national speaker, having presented before thousands at a time. Her presentations, which she gives across the country, appeal to a wide variety of audiences from every walk of life. Her boldness in telling a story we are now seeing repeatedly, abusive power, sexuality, religion, and truth, endears her to the audience in its authenticity. Jojo is based out of Rochester, Michigan, where she lives with the love of her life, their 2 sons, and their adorable rescue puppy, which is about as the happy ending as it can possibly sound, right? I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So let's just go ahead and dive in. I mean, I want people to go get your book, end of story. But kind of give us a bit of the background. You've got a pretty extraordinary tale of kind of what, in it, as I recall when we chatted, it almost went in phases of like before your family got into this stuff and then they got into it and it got really weird and then you had to get out. So lead us through that story. I know it's going to be kind of probably a long answer, but describe this childhood abuse as it kind of began and then you recognized it and then you realized you needed to get out somehow.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here, Jackie. I'm real honored to be on your show. It's you struck me again. Our stories, resonated as far as your message to the world at large, and thank you for the messages you're getting out there. I like to reshare what you post because I think it's very relatable to what women especially are going through in this day and age. But yes, my story began when I was a child. Life was great for a minute until I was about early teens, sort of like the tween years, the teen years, the abuse really started. And throughout the years, right before that, there was a lot of initial abuse. So, things like getting whacked across the face or dragged across the room or whatnot. These are things that essentially I thought was a normal part of life for much of my life. And then in the early teen years, the physical abuse got really bad. The way it started was it had a lot to do with religion as well as culture. So I grew up in with an Arabic background, and I'll put it out there right away that not all Arabs are like this, and it's not segregated to the Muslim Arabs or the Christian Arabs. It's just the mentality, the patriarchal mentality that they grow up with over there in the old country, and then they translate that to the United States when they immigrate here. Just that mentality is very patriarchal. And so it's very misogynistic. The women have no say. It's kind of sit down and be quiet, do the house stuff and, leave us to the rest. So that mentality was how we grew up. And then my dad, quote unquote, and so I call him Abuser One in my book, and so I'll call him Abuser One. I do that in all my interviews. So I don't really relate to him as my father because he is such a horrible individual. So Abuser One found Jesus, so he said, and you and I both know this is not the Jesus of the Bible, but he found Jesus at a seminar, and he said, all right, we're going to follow this cult. And so the seminar was basically a cultish type of organization that he connected with and said, these people have the same principles that I believe in, and that this is how I want to run my family. So through the years, that was just like the first cult that he found, but through the years, he would find cults like that. So when you say in and out, that's kind of how it was, is he would latch himself on and latch us in turn onto the cult, who would be very rules-based. It would be a very rules-based organization. You must do these 10 things as your gateway to heaven. And again, you and I both know there's one way to heaven, through Jesus Christ. But with his mentality, it was, unless you follow these 10 steps, you're not going to be saved. So if you ever veered from that, you would get abused. So for me, the abuse began as physical abuse. So every time, and I think that there's a truth to this whole many are called, few are chosen. I think that internally we have something that resonates or doesn't resonate with a certain mindset. So early on in my childhood, I said, this is not right. My siblings kind of went along with it, and they still do. The mentality that this is acceptable, this is okay to behave in this abusive manner. And we all must follow the patriarch. And as it were, it was abuser one. Also, abuser one trained who I call abuser two, which was my older brother. He trained him to basically follow and emulate his footsteps. So he was 2 years older than me, but through the years, the mantle kind of went to him as, okay, you basically have authority over your siblings, similar to the cult leader having authority over us, and me having authority over, mom and the siblings. My older brother then was given the mantle as well. So there was a huge part of the abuse that had to do with my older brother as well, abuser two. He would get physical. The sexual abuse began so I talk about this story in the book, and I think it's very relevant because a lot of young women don't know what that is. So in our culture, whether it was our religious culture or our Arabic culture, we were not taught anything about sexuality. It was a very taboo topic. We couldn't even talk about it or what that looked like. So when I was being sexually abused, I didn't understand that's what it was. The first time it happened was because I had disobeyed direct orders from abuser one, and I was relegated to my bedroom. Go to your room. So the physical abuse happened after I disobeyed orders, then relegated to the bedroom. And then it's basically like punishment, like isolation until you do what they want. Mm-hmm. So I was isolated in the bedroom for hours at that point. And then he walked in and basically, essentially in so many words says, have I broken you down? So I'm crying. I'm saying, okay, yes, get me out of here. I'm good. I'll do whatever you say. I've been isolated to the point that I'm willing to listen to whatever your order was. And he then began to sexually abuse me. And I didn't know what that was. He got on top of me, and it began this whole cycle of, the door was closed, the whole cycle of, this is what I'm going to do to you because of this. This is your punishment for doing this. I'm going to get my pleasure off of you. This was the one thing I never told any of my siblings. Now, my siblings saw the rest of it. They saw the physical abuse. So fast forward a few years, physical abuse starts, my early teens, fast forward a few years. His ultimate dream was to start a family business. So a few years into my teens, we started a family business, and the abuse carried on to that. So it was basically, I needed to do the back office and not put myself out there in any way. And abuser one and abuser two were the face of the organization. As time went on, he would again attach to various religious organizations. I would protest this every single time. The businesses grew to the point where we were making good money. So people in our community thought, we were staples at church. You're staples in the business community. You're getting the reputation. We're getting the PR out there. The news stations are talking about us in these various businesses. So this put my silence deeper in, because how do you tell somebody who thinks you're basically equivalent to a deacon at church that this guy's abusing you? Mm-hmm. So again, the religious organizations, that he attached himself to sort of had that same patriarchal mentality. So being in and out had, I think, a lot to do with anytime it got close to anyone disagreeing with him, that's when he would back off and then go to a different organization. Meanwhile, we're all, being abused. So do you want me to go through till when I got out?
Yeah, I mean, basically that would be my following question is, what were your thoughts on all this? We've already kind of clarified you had a sense that this is wrong, that you might have been in those moments where it's like, fine, sure, I'll do whatever you say, just let me be free. But you had some kind of awareness that this isn't the way it's supposed to be. Now, why do you feel that your siblings didn't catch that? Or was it a lack of courage, or did you have any idea why?
So I've often thought about it, and I've through the years I've had a therapist, and I've asked her as well. And so my conclusion to why they are still there and why they never fought back is two things. First of all, yes, it takes a lot of courage and a lot of bravery, and I didn't understand what that really meant. People, when I finally moved out and established my own path, kept saying, "You're so brave, you're so courageous." For me, it was just like, enough is enough. I'm not going to be treated this way anymore, and I'm done. But the second thing is, what people who are not in an abusive situation don't always see is the beautiful moments that you get and the fulfillment that you get from the abuser when you have the positive moments.
Yeah.
So as our businesses grew, for example, we were world travelers. We traveled overseas. We traveled across the country, and anytime you were doing what the abuser wanted, and he gave you that, or she gives you that approval, per se, that stamp of approval, it feels good.
Yeah.
And so there's a certain high that comes from that, and you end up being so victimized that you live for that high. And so there's a brainwashing that happens with that. Mm-hmm. And unless you're constantly fighting against that brainwashing, you just go with it. And you say, oh, this feels good. It's my fault. Because they would always say, you're pushing his buttons. It's your fault that he's doing that. You know just what to say to like turn him into this abuser. And so there's a certain fulfillment in that approval. And I think that they are still giving that. Many of my siblings are still traveling across the country doing their business that, we created so long ago. They still in the community that hasn't, understood that what I'm saying is the truth. So in their various communities, they're like the big shots. And so there's a high in your head that comes with that. And I think that's also why my mom, I will never give a wife and a mother for sure an excuse per se. I look at my own kids and I say, my love story, and as much as I love my husband, God forbid if he ever even got close to anything, I like,
right.
These are my children, and so I will never understand truly why my mom never defended me within that abuse. But I think that a big reason for that is, again, the brainwashing that you get when you get the approval, and they live for that. But I think there's courage involved. And when people ask me now, about what to do and how to help themselves out of a situation, I tell them, find it down in your gut, because it's there. We're not wired to be treated that way as humans. And you might have pushed it down a long time, but it's there somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that's what you need to pull out, and get. So then in my late teens, the businesses were growing. Life was great. In my early 20s, again, businesses are growing, but we're traveling to all of these seminars that we're throwing, because we would put on large events for the industry we were in, anywhere from 20 people to 2,000 people we would speak in front of. And anytime I would open my mouth to say anything against what was happening, or if I had an idea, or we'd be in an attorney meeting and I would say, this or that is how we should structure things. Basically, it was shut up and be quiet, sit in your corner, we're in control. So the events would pile up on each other, and it would be something so small that I would say that would turn into such drama and abuse, and I would always question that. So finally, in my mid-20s, I had, so my love story ties into why It's how I removed myself. So in my mid-20s, I had an epiphany because I was in love with my now husband since I was 9. And I always said I would marry him. And they always said, you can never marry him. He's not Arabic, and he's not of our, culture. So although he was Christian, which is how I was raised, he was not of our culture. And B, looking back on it, they could tell he wasn't going to listen to them. He wasn't going to go under this authoritative, situation that had been created. So they kept tearing us away from each other. So in our teen years, it was just friendship. In the early 20s, he looked at me one day and said, hey, I really like you. I want to ask your dad if I could take you out on a date. And I was basically like, it's about time. Like, I've been in love with you my whole life, basically. So he did. He talked to Abuser One and said, I'd like to take your daughter on a date. And so if you can imagine, like, the Godfather movie, it was very much like that. So he was basically like, no, this will never happen. You can never date my daughter, and don't even think about it, or, you'll find yourself out in the field somewhere. Literally, he took him. He took him into our work van at the time, because we had an air duct cleaning company. So he took him into that van and he took him for a ride. And when they came back, Paul looked at me and said, we can't date. Like, your dad's not going to allow this. So then in our mid-20s, I basically went against the family and did a sort of like a secretive dating relationship with Paul. They didn't know we were talking, and we just started kind of falling in love. And within a few months, we were deeply and madly in love, and said, that's it. So we went to Abuser One and said, we're going to get married. And he said, well, basically choose between him or us. If you choose him, we'll never talk to you again. If you choose us, you can never speak with him again. At the time, because that was all I knew was my family and our businesses, I chose my family. So we separated ways, broke each other. Like, I broke his heart, I broke my heart. It was like you were like ripping a piece of, my body out of me. And I thought I'd never see this guy or talk to him ever again. But that was my first, I would say, huge major catalyst to, like, removing myself. The second one also had to do with the man. Started dating a guy a few years later, and he was visiting me. And this was the last time I let Abuser One touch me. This guy was visiting me in my family's mansion. My Abuser One didn't want him there. So he told me to remove him and say, get out of the house. I refused, and he started beating me up and pulling me by the hair, dragging me across the room. I was 29 at the time.
Wow.
I said, this is the last time. I will never let him touch me this way again. And I started living with friends. Moved out the next day, started living with friends in their houses, and he never did touch me, abuse me ever again. And then when I did that, and I took my life, and I basically jumped without a net, didn't know who I was going to live with, didn't know how I was going to get a job. Because mind you, my money, which I didn't really have money, it was all a big family pot. My money was coming from the family businesses. So how am I going to make money? How am I going to make money? How am I going to pay bills? How am I going to do anything? I had no idea, because for 29 years, I'd lived under this roof. So when I jumped without a net, and I will say this loud and clear, God provided the net. It was literally like out of the woodwork. People were like, here's a great property to rent. It was very inexpensive in a very safe place. I got a job that was like an insane amount of money for my qualifications at the time. And he was a client, a PR client, and he said, I will pay you this salary and you will still be my PR client. And I will still be your PR client, so you'll get the monthly bonus from that. People started providing furniture and kitchenware and all kinds of things. And then I went online to Match.com to get a date, because I was going to a family wedding and I didn't want to go alone, be like, oh, this loser's alone and she doesn't have her family. Match.com, 30 days after I joined, matched me with Paul, the love of my life, as our match of the day. So for me, the catalyst was all these things. And then finally, when I jumped and removed myself from this abusive situation, just the doors were opening wide.
Mm, that's amazing. So a couple things that make me want to ask from that is, one, what was your family's reaction to you leaving? I mean, was it clean, like we're never going to speak to you again and just boom, they shut you out, or were there more repercussions, it seemed?
Okay, so at first it was clean. No, we'll never talk to you again. You mean nothing to us. Um, don't even call. Like, they blocked me from their numbers. All the social media was deleted. All of that type of thing. But then when Paul came in the picture, so when I moved out was early spring of 2011. So spring, summer, there was this very distant sort of relationship. And then I started, right before I connected with Paul, I started going back home and just showing up on the weekends and being like, treating it like I was in college and I was gone for the week, and acting like their distance and their silence when I would come home to the abuser's house was like I would ignore it. Like, I just felt like if I just kept going back, they would accept me back. And they didn't. So then when I reconnected with Paul and I shared with him the situation, he called, because he's an amazing man, and he called and tried to reconnect us and reunite us. And because of his influence, they actually started being very loving and kind. They hosted a family dinner for us, sort of wrapped us back in the fold. And then Paul went to them and said, I'm going to propose. So this was October, we reconnected. Well, middle of September 2011, middle of October, we were really reconnecting. And then in November, around Thanksgiving, he went to them and said, I'm going to propose on Christmas Eve. They said, great, hugged him, kissed him, yay, happy, whatever. It's going to be a big, happy family. The day before Christmas Eve, Abuser One called him and said, hey, we're going out of town, taking the whole family. Not going to be back till after the new year. And if you propose to my daughter, we'll never talk to you again. So just as any abuser would do, try to retake back control of the situation. And I was visiting Paul's family that weekend. We were all going to stay in his parents' house, and it was going to be Christmas weekend at his parents. And so I went, and I was all excited. Yay, we're going to have Christmas weekend together. I don't have to worry about my family. They're out of town. And he's all stressed. So that night after dinner, so the night before Christmas Eve, I looked at him and I was like, babe, like, you've not been yourself all night. What is happening? He didn't want to tell me. And finally I go, oh my God, Abuser One called you, didn't he? I know they're going out of town. What did he say? So he proceeded to tell me. He's like, I wasn't sure. Should I tell you? And then, you know that this is happening. And then we don't go through with the proposal because I'm supposedly, proposing tomorrow. I was going to surprise you. Do I not tell you, propose to you, you say yes, and then you're upset with me because your family's not on board again? I was like, and I went into a fit, and I was like, we're not doing this again. You're mine, I'm yours. We're getting married. And if they don't like it, that's it. So he found a way to surprise me the next day. And then the silent treatment began. No talking. Then again, over Christmas, between Christmas and New Year, that week, I sent a long email to my family. And I said, I finally reconnect with the love of my life. Like, you guys need to be happy for me. We're going to start planning our wedding. We're going to get married very soon. We've waited too long. Anyways, so can we please have a meeting after Christmas? After you guys get back from the new year. I got a response back, basically yes. Like, there was a lot of drama involved, but basically yes. So then beginning or middle of January, we met. What the meeting was, though, was basically their form of an intervention. It was the 7 of them on one side of the room and me on the other, and they tried to basically say, drop all affiliation, come back and live at home, apologize, and basically kiss Abuser One and Abuser Two's ring. So I sat there for like 2 hours, and then I walked out, and silent treatment began again. So for the last 7 years, it's been back and forth. Lots of, I got pregnant. I would drive to an hour away to try to, get together with them. I said, now you have grandkids. So for 7 years, it's been a back and forth, and we're finally at a spot now where there's absolutely no communication, and I'm absolutely okay with it. Because I know, and every time something major happens, I call. My brother had a baby, I called. My, sister got married and didn't invite me. I called and wrote her a long letter. Mother's Day comes, I called, say Happy Mother's Day. My mom's birthday comes, Happy birthday. But there's no affiliation, and I'm okay with that now because I've tried, and I can go to sleep at night peacefully knowing I did the best I could.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's such a misunderstanding in the church, and I don't think it's at all biblical, where somehow we have to get people to be happy with us again, and that's making peace. That's like doing the right thing. And especially this idea of biological family versus the family of God, right? I mean, the most stunning verse of many, there are quite a few in the Bible, but is when Christ says, "Who are my mother and my brother? Those who do the will of God." And I mean, it's Mary, it's not like she did anything wrong. This is not an abusive family of origin he's coming out of. So, and I believe that in that verse, she's standing like right there in front of him. So how rude. But what a massive point for Christ to make, that our biological families are important and are to be loved, but with less, kind of loyalty than the cross itself, right? Leave your mother and your brother and pick up your cross and follow me. And with no more than we would just for any other good person. And I'm not saying if you have a healthy family, abandon them in their time of need, but
right.
There's so much manipulation that can be used, like, well, we're family. And therefore, all of these 15 things that have nothing to do with the Bible, nothing to do with your calling, but are put over you in either harmless-ish ways or extreme abusive ways. And I think it's very difficult to get into this mindset of like, that's not of God. That's not of God at all. So talk a little bit about your own relationship with God through this. I mean, you were raised Christian per se, and that these cults probably had pieces of scripture and stuff enough that, so how did you develop a relationship with God, and how did that evolve during or after, whenever, where, you weren't like, you didn't see these people who follow Jesus and you were like, heck with Jesus, this is awful. So how did you kind of salvage the truth of salvation in all of this mess?
I'm so glad you asked me this question because, and excuse me if I choke up as I answer you, because in all of in my book, in my speaking with people, and my speaking at, at events or whatnot, I always tell this part because I literally think I would not be here today if it wasn't for him. And here's why. So a lot of people say, how do you believe in God after you were abused this way? And for me, it's how do I believe in God? How do I not believe in God? Because there's something that happened to me when I was being abused. It's very hard to explain, but it's like, the way I compare it to is like Footsteps in the Sand, that poem, which is how he carries us. So yes, I was being abused, but I can't tell you that how many times when I was being abused, when I literally felt out of body, like it wasn't happening to me, like I was watching it happen to someone else. And it wasn't because of, which a lot of trauma happens, and a lot of people say when you're being traumatized that happens, but I literally felt the arms of Jesus Christ around me when this was happening. And so people say, well, how do you believe in Jesus if he let you experience that? Well, here's my answer. Like, we live in a broken world.
Yep.
The Bible says over and over again, it'll happen on the just and on the unjust. Just because the sun came up in the morning doesn't mean that somebody did something good, so now the sun came up. Just because it rained doesn't mean that it rained because somebody did something bad. And that's kind of how I see life. Like, yes, there's cause and effect, but the blind man came to him, and the people around were like, well, what did his parents do that caused him to be blind? Well, his parents didn't do anything. Like, this was done. I'm sorry. This was done for the glory of God. And honestly, like, honestly, I feel that very strongly that what happened to me happened for the glory of God. And I don't say that in pride and like, I don't say that like, oh my God, I'm so amazing, God's going to use me and God's using me. But truly, like, I don't feel like I could be making the impact that I'm making on people's lives. The women, men, children, teenagers, old people, couples, that are coming to me in private and in public, sending me emails, messages, calling me, whatever, asking me to speak at events. I could not be making that impact if I didn't have the experience that I had. Yeah. And the impact, our purpose is very clearly to point people towards him and to point people towards, the glory and the magnificent and the goodness of him. So that's the one reason I believe in God, and I did not turn my back per se to Christ. The other thing is literally the doors that have opened for me in my childhood, in my teen years, in my 20s, and now in my 30s could not have opened because of like random circumstance. Like the things, if I had days, I couldn't like tell you all the things that have happened that are very clearly divine intervention. So a lot of people say, the cause and effect or the power of positive thinking or whatnot. I mean, granted, I've always been a positive person, whether I was being abused or not. Just my outlook on life is just very naturally positive. But, God's, and then like the Paul thing, I mean, literally, I feel like God, I mean, come on, like, how does that happen? Like,
match of the day.
I mean, yeah, like we ran in the same circles. It's not like we didn't run in the same circles. We went to like some of the same weddings, we realized, some of the same funerals, like we knew the same people. We lived in the same vicinity. So for us not to see each other for 3.5 years and then God to be like, oh, here he is in your match profile. Like, you can't tell me that's random circumstance. And then the healings, I believe God is a healer. I can't imagine I would be this healed and whole. I know people go to therapy and they get healed, and that. And I've done the work and gone to therapy and talked to people and just yelled at God and yelled at life and all of it. I've gone through the work, but the healing that I've experienced from this abuse, the sexual, physical, emotional, verbal abuse, I just don't see it happening without God. So yes, there's a lot of things that point me to say, I believe in Jesus Christ and I wouldn't be alive today. I mean, that's the other thing is there was physical abuse to the point of like, I was in the hospital, and it's like, well, how did I survive that? I was in the hospital for something the other day and, they have to ask you these questions,
Yeah.
And they're like, are you being abused at home? I was like, well, many years ago, if you asked me this, like we were laughing, me and the nurse, But yeah, so that's how I believe in God and why he's still everything to me.
I love it. That's amazing. And, I think, and it's not like, I don't want to call it an honor, but there is something where, especially with what you see, you versus your siblings, where you had the courage to leave this. And I almost feel like I think God kind of knows who may be more primed for that, perhaps, based on how he designed them. But we have free will, and so we get to choose whether or not we act on that. And you had what it took to go out and be kind of this light bearer after this, whereas other people don't. So, and it almost irritates me every time I go through something, whether it's like, fears around pregnancy or all these kinds of crazy moves that we're doing now. And I just think, dang it, it's going to be another testimony, isn't it? And it's kind of like you're in the middle of a struggle and you're like, I know this is going to be useful. I know he's going to use it. And I know that's probably why it's happening. And it's bigger than us. And if anything, it's a confirmation that God, one, is enough to get us through it. And two, that because of God, we're enough to get through it. We will be able to do it. He's not going to give us anything we can't get through. And that's it kind of makes you feel like, I'm a little bit more of a baller than I give myself credit for. Like, me and God, we can do this,
I was just going to say, doesn't it make you feel stronger?
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, I think we can take it on, not that I'm inviting difficulty.
So much too, doesn't it make you feel like more equipped and stronger?
Yeah.
This crazy world.
Yeah.
And all the different things that come at you.
Totally. And then to be able to turn it around, which is what I want to talk about next, to the work that you do with people. So I imagine that people just come to you bawling with their stories of what they've been through, what they're in, what they're seeing someone they love go through. What do you say to someone who comes up to you after you speak or something? And what is the encouragement? You gave us some, like the step there of go find that courage in you, but what is your advice, both getting through it emotionally and practically for somebody in any kind of situation like this? I know it can be, work, partners, parents, children, siblings, etc. It's varied.
Yes. So I really appreciate this question too, because I have found that, and don't take me wrong, but I found that there's like two kinds of people. Okay. So it's like the tale of two people, right? So I get emails all the time, and the other day I literally got two back to back, and it was like this perfect example, like the tale of two humans. One lady was just again pouring her heart out, and like I'm crying through it and everything. But she's seeking answers, right? And then the other one, the other human that had emailed me was saying, hey, and basically was sort of self-sabotaging is how I call it. It's sort of like victim blaming, not victim blaming, but like blaming everyone else.
Yeah.
And victimizing herself in a sense of like, this has happened to me and whatnot. And while we all go through those moments, we can't stay in those moments. And so I've learned to discern per se, because for a long time I couldn't deal with any negativity. I was like, if you've got negativity, like stay away from me, and now I've been given this ultimate privilege of saying, this is how we can get out of our negativity, and dwell, with this positive, like, outlook on life. And so the way I handle the one who's basically saying self-sabotage is I strictly direct them, to therapy. And I have a list of books, which I'd be happy to send you. A few I can tell you off the top of my head. So like Dr. Henry Cloud's book, the Boundaries book, Beth Moore's book, Get Out of That Pit. That book saved my life. I probably did 3 readings of that before I finally moved out. And there's this book, it's not very well known, I don't think, but it's called, if you want to get out of the boat, you have to walk on water. And it's it's the parable of Peter and how he got out and walked on water, but he had to get out of the boat to do so. So there's a list of books that I send people. But for the person that's truly seeking answers, I provide them with my steps. So I have 7 steps that got me out of where I got out of. And I mean, there's a lot of things to do, but those 7 steps seem to be the core of what I did. Get out of your denial. Stop living in denial that you're in a bad circumstance. Stop giving people excuses. The things I would tell people about my family that was so abnormal, like, oh, it's okay, and this is normal and whatever. So stop giving these excuses to the people around you and to yourself. So get out of denial. Find your solutions. So books, people around you. We are being given this extensive amount of resources. I mean, gosh, whether it's the library, your church library, the regular library, people around you. Divine intervention is about those people that you surround yourself with too. I looking back on it, the miraculous kinds of people that were there to help me through this path, it's fascinating when you look at all these different individuals. So tap into your resources, find your solutions, and then number 3, take action. So take action on these answers that you've now found. It might be a little step, right? Like I didn't just move out. I had that extenuating circumstance where he, beat me up, and I was like, I'm done, and moved out the next day. But it was little steps I had taken. I mean, I was getting coffees with women that I saw that were successful, that looked like I wanted to look in 10 or 15 years. And I would take coffees with them. I essentially lied to the family and said, hey, I'm doing a business meeting here, a business meeting there. And I mean, in a sense, if that's what you have to do to get out of your situation. So take little steps, baby steps, but do something, because the more you do, the bigger your solutions will be presented. Number 4, prepare for your wins and losses, right? So like, you're going to start doing this stuff, but then you're going to have wins, great wins, and you're going to have great losses. Because gosh, you've never done this before. Like, I was 29. I had at least a car on my own. I didn't know what car insurance looked like. I didn't know how to go rent an apartment. I was 29. Most people have done this. They've gone to college. They've, done all this stuff. Like, so yeah, it was quite embarrassing. But on the other hand, it was very empowering.
Yeah.
So prepare for the fails that you're going to inevitably have and the embarrassing moments that you're inevitably going to have, but also get ready for those wins, because those aren't easy to take either. I mean, you've been used to living under this rock and living under this abusive situation. So get ready for some wins and prepare yourself for that. Because I didn't realize how hard it was to like actually be successful on certain things. Like, because you're so used to kind of losing at life, and then you're like successful and you're like, gosh, like, do I deserve this? And all those feelings start hitting. So prepare for the wins. And then number 6 is like, when you got those wins, you're going to be starting to heal. So start your healing process. So I started seeing a therapist right away. And I cannot tell you how that's like, for me, it's like giving candy to a baby. It's like, you have to go to a therapist, like go get healed, right? So, and find someone that has my therapist and I have this joke, because my first call to her was literally, I left a message saying, hi, I was referred to you by so-and-so, and I'm Lebanese, and I'm Christian, and I don't want to explain to you what either of those things is. So if you don't have any Lebanese clients that you've had to deal with their cultural issues, then please don't call me back, because I don't want our sessions to be about me explaining to you our cultural differences. Like, literally, I was so like tied up. And she did it, because she had Arabic clients. She said, come on in, like, and I said, and I don't want a shoulder to cry on, because I have lots of friends. I want someone who can give me answers right now. And so she did. So find someone who can give you answers. But yeah, let the healing begin. Because the more the healing begins, the more success you'll have, the more you'll be able to let go of the past, move on into your future. And then number 7, I explain to people how you can't plateau. So basically repeat. So repeat starting from number 1. There's always going to be an area in your life that you're going to have to do those 7 steps with, and do those 6 steps with till you get to the 7th, and repeat it again. Because we never want to plateau and accept good enough as good enough. We always want to be great in every area of our life. And we always want to keep improving and getting to the next step. And then once you do that, you'll be surrounding yourself with those same types of people. And so, yeah, so when people come to me and they email me, I discern, can I help them? Am I qualified? Am I, or are they kind of self-sabotaging where they need somebody, bigger and better and greater? And then number 2 is I try to just really explain these steps and work through it with them. And so when I do my speaking, the steps are there. I give them, handouts to help explain it even more. And then in my emails, I try to implement those steps within the email strings that we're emailing back and forth.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So there's so many different kind of gradations of this, but what do you feel like would be some symptoms women should be looking for if they're in an abusive situation? And men, of course, as well, but just people being like, wait a second. What are some of the kind of telltale signs that you would list out?
Ooh, great question. So I need to email you like a chart that you could maybe put with this.
Totally.
But there's a great chart that's on the website that I love that actually helped me through National Center for Domestic Violence, which, by the way, a certain percentage of my profits from any speaking engagement, any book that's sold, goes to the National Center for Domestic Violence, because they've helped me so much in my life. If you go on their website and you try to chat with somebody, they have this like trick where you can press basically a certain button on your keyboard if somebody walks in that's abusing you to close the screen out. And that's they're a fabulous resource. So a few things to look for. Do you feel like your voice is heard? A. You know, are you able to speak your mind without feeling like you're being condescended to, feeling like you're being put down, belittled? And even if it's slight things. So like I give this example, my mom immigrated from Lebanon. And there was this constant like making fun of her from abuser one, her husband, who was abusing her. And it was like making fun of her accent, or like, no, let me make that phone call because they're not going to understand you because your accent. Or if we were in a group of friends, it would be that constant like biting comment about her accent. Like, oh, did you understand what she said? Ha ha. You know, so can you use your voice without feeling belittled, condescended to, or negative in any way? Do you have freedom, right? So like when you think about like a personal dating relationship, so like I'm married with 2 kids, and I was out last night. My husband had met me. He stayed for an hour, but he hadn't seen the kids all day. So he's like, I'm going home, you know, stay as long as you want, you know, come home. So one of the people at the event was like, you know, your phone's not blowing up. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, well, like your husband hasn't texted you, like when are you coming home and what are you doing and how long are you going to be? And I was like, well, he did text me, but it was just this one thing. So I pull out my phone and it was a picture of him with my kid. And I was like, that's about like all he texts me. Like, he's not going to like be like, you know, so do you have your freedom? Like, you know, can you go out without your boyfriend or significant other or girlfriend or whoever it is being like, you know, asking you a myriad of questions? You know, do you have the ability to, you know, whether it's go places or do things within your house, buy things. So like groceries was a big one. That was a big example that I used. Growing up, my mom couldn't buy certain things. It was this or that. And I'm not talking about like a normal budget, like a household budget. I'm talking about like the control to the point of that. Work. Are you doing the job that you want? You know, so say you're in an abusive relationship at work, like with a boss or a coworker. Are you, you know, the easiest one is your voice being heard at the table? Are you able to present your ideas in a work environment? But not only that, there's this whole method that when you're at work, you should be really doing what you love. And so is your boss making you do things, you know, that are not? And then in addition to that, you know, we're talking about this Me Too stuff and the, you know, the Time's Up movements. And these are really relevant to like corporate America, but they're also relevant in smaller businesses. So, you know, any signs of abuse in a work environment, you know, a tap on the butt, a hand on the shoulder, you know, any flirtatious that isn't, you know, isn't something that you are looking for or asking for. You know, so there's a lot of examples in a work environment, and there's a lot of examples in the personal relationships that I present to people, you know, when I'm talking.
That's awesome. And I think, you know, with so many women, especially if they grew up in any kind of abusive environment or saw it, there's just this cycle of, sure, it depends on individual personalities, et cetera. But in general, I think we learn to not rock the boat. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to be the one who blows the whistle, who goes into the big boss to tell him about the little boss who did this to me. And then when we do take a small step, which just like you were saying, kind of rinse and repeat, it's so easy to fall back into some level of complacency that around the fact that, well, this over here hasn't been addressed, but we feel kind of like, well, I did something. I don't want to push it too far. You know, I'm just going to drop back. And it's so difficult because of how these things are ingrained when we're younger to break that cycle of, I don't know what, you know, there's so many words we could use: passivity, complacency, like fear, whatever, all these different things. So I think that rinse and repeat concept is so important. It's just like any other area of our life. And it's not so much that we need to be on like a witch hunt for people around us, but even just self-check, you know, and am I abusing other people? Is there anyone who I'm kind of taking advantage of, having too many expectations on, pushing too hard, whatever, but just looking at my relationships is all right and well. And then, okay, move forward, you know, and just kind of doing that regular check, I think is is huge. So if there's a woman, go.
If you don't mind my saying, to be prepared for the backlash. So the whistleblower, right?
Yep.
So I haven't been invited to a family party in years, you know. There's people that basically disassociated with me because of what I did, even when I moved out. There were friends that I thought were friends that chose that side because they'd rather live that lifestyle with my siblings and my parents than to take my side and defend me. My own siblings, you know, disown me. And so being prepared for the backlash of speaking your voice. And I have not been shy. Like over the years, social media, I've used it as an outlet. Like this is the way it is. And I've had people like, you know, as petty as like defriending me on social media sites and, or even like sending me emails like, well, you shouldn't be talking like that about your family. And, you know, silence is so like normal now. It's like, don't even like say it, you know? So being prepared for that whiplash or whatever from people around you when you do speak out.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean that, and of course there's the balance and there's different topics and stuff, but that is the Christian life. Like we're running around out there basically offending people. Let's just be real. If we're spreading the gospel, that's what we do. So we offend people.
It's true.
And you need help.
And you need help.
To have the answer. And I can only imagine with all that backlash and whatever environment this happens in, that relationship with God becomes just so important, you know, because and especially if this is happening in like a church environment or something where people who have been to you as if they were God, you know, like almost representative of God. And if you don't have that personal relationship where you're like, no, you know, I can feel his presence. I know the Holy Spirit's voice. This is not him. This is not okay. And even if you're telling me that he's displeased with me because of how I'm behaving, I know you're wrong. You know what I mean? So having that core, core of truth in you is just essential. So
Christians were some of the biggest adversaries, to be honest with you. Like, you know, this and that, so judgmental, you know? And so, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. It's like was it Gandhi or someone who said, I like your Jesus, but not your Christians, you know? So it's, watch the norms that we get caught in doing anything in secular culture and family cultures and church culture. Just like, wait a second. Is this what Christ is asking us to do? So if there's a woman who is stuck, you know, who's listening to this and is maybe not in a overt abusive relationship, but she's just like, something needs to shift and I need to get my courage up. I need to know where to begin, you know, more so than steps this time. What would you say to like a warrior princess kind of cry? What would you say to her to help her find that courage inside to, even if it's just like, look, we're fighting and I need to get my husband to go to marriage counseling and that's probably all we'll need, or whatever it may be. Where can she find that strength? What would you say?
So some of the most powerful things that caused me to change and that warrior princess that you're talking about was literally to look at history. So who do we respect? Who do we, what is history going to say about us? Right. So like life is so, I don't know how to say it, but it's like life is so fragile and so short. And so like, what is your legacy going to be? Do you want, you know, the future the future generation. So say you have kids, you know, for me, it was like, I needed to heal for my kids. I needed to heal because I wanted to leave a mark on society. I wanted to make a difference, and I can't make a difference living in this sad, oppressive. So it's very oppressive to be abused. And so looking outside of that and sort of dreaming your dream seems so unreal. But I'm here to say on the other side of it, it's as real can be. And so for me, I read a lot about, you know, because reading is something that as an abused person, at least in my situation with all the abuse I had, was at least something I could still do. And a lot of people can't. I mean, access on your phone, if they're watching your phone, then the library, or you know, there's so many resources to read about, but sort of that vision of of looking at that vision. So in the Bible, it says, without a vision, my people perish.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because they perish because they have no future to look forward to. So I knew what I wanted, and I knew I couldn't get that under this oppression. And so that's what I would encourage women, men, children to look at, is like, you are made for more than this. You are made to be something bigger than this. Your destiny. There's a song that was like my rally cry. I went to a youth thing, and they had the song. It's like, I have a destiny, I know I will fulfill. I have a destiny, and it is God's will, or something. And it was like all about your destiny. So for me, the heart cry, the rally cry is, know that you're made for more than this. You are bigger than this, despite how they make you feel. And look at the future, and what do you want that to look like? And although it looks like right now you have no future, that whole line of positive thinking actually works. Like, and God is there, and trust me when I say that He is alive and well, and He will literally get you to that point. That's, I guess, the best I could give you for that one.
That'll do. That's a good one to end on. Thank you so much for this, Jojo. I mean, I think because of what we talked about, so many people in these situations, even if they escape it, are terrified to speak out, terrified to describe what they went through, to describe the process of getting out, to talk about what it's like now. I mean, it takes an extraordinary person to do that. Even things I've been through, I'm kind of choosy with, how do I tell that story to not really reveal those people, and so the boldness that's required to paint the picture that then allows somebody who's just fumbling around in the dark thinking, this isn't right, but I don't know what to do. And maybe it is right because they keep telling me I should be grateful or whatever, I can't thank you enough for what you're doing, and thank you for being here. Where can women find you? Where can we find your book? I know we said on Amazon, but your website, where can people connect with what you're doing?
Wonderful. My website is myname.com. So it's Jojo Dries, Jojo Dries, D as in David, RIES.com. I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on Twitter. My Twitter isn't as active as the rest of my social media,
Mine either.
but I'm very, I need to be more active on Twitter. I'd like to be more active on Twitter, but everything else is quite active.
Awesome.
And thank you, Jackie. I really appreciate being on here. It's an honor. Our vibe really was just there from the beginning, and you are doing amazing things. I've been talking a lot about you to so many people, and God bless you and all the work that you're doing as well.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's a sisterhood of women out there who are like, you know what? Let's go do something. So
yes, amen, sister.
Here's to that. All right. Well, thank you, Jojo. It's such a pleasure. Ladies, go check out her stuff. I mean, what a force of nature, doing really important and difficult work. So support her, if nothing else, by that book, and start spreading the words that she's spreading to people who need to hear it, perhaps through you. So thanks, Jojo. I know we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Talk again soon. Bye-bye.